Welcome to another episode of Judge for Yourself. The EFF's behaviour in Parliament has sparked debate about the role of MPs in our democracy. As you probably know, the party caused a measure of chaos in the National Assembly after its MPs refused to leave the House until President Jacob Zuma had answered a question about when he would pay back money spent on his Nkandla home. Were the EFF MPs within their rights to protest in this manner, or will the party make Parliament utterly dysfunctional by ignoring its rules? If you'd like to join the debate about Parliament on Twitter, please use the hashtag JFYEFF. Now, to discuss these issues, in our Cape Town studios, we have Ben Turok, former ANC MP for 20 years, and Richard Callard, Social Professor in Public Law Department at the University of Cape Town. In our Johannesburg studios, we have political analyst Somadoda Fikeni, Professor Somadoda Fikeni, let me get that right. But before we even start, let's just hear from EFF leader Julius Malema, right after his party had staged the protest to which I made reference in the National Assembly.
It's not a sad day for Parliament. This is a good day for Parliament. Protest is allowed. Freedom of expression is allowed. And at this level, it must be unlimited. Must never be scared to engage in any form of protest, insisting that the executive must be held accountable.
Richard, is he right? Is it a sad day for Parliament?
Well, in many respects, I find myself concluding it was a good day for Parliament because we're talking about Parliament and we're caring about Parliament. And Parliament is right now at the centre of the national debate. After a 10-year period where, frankly, it's become increasingly irrelevant, despite the hard work in committees of people such as Professor Turok is sitting alongside me. So the fact that Parliament seems to be grasping the issues of the day is good, very good thing. Of course, the rules of Parliament must always be respected. That's an important principle of parliamentary democracy. But at the Council for the Advancement of the South African Constitution's Advisory Council meeting just 2 days after the incident in Parliament, I found myself amongst a discussion of people who I regard as progressive and principled, who felt that the bigger issue was the failure of President Zuma to account properly for Nkandla. And Malema's pressing him on that was actually very, very important.
What do you say? Should we be worried about the rules? I see you don't have a tie on like me, so you're clearly casual about these matters.
Well,
I mean,
yes, it's Sunday and I'm day off, so
okay,
yes.
Fair enough. No, what I meant by that was, I mean, should we be so anal about the rules?
Well, let me say firstly that we shouldn't exaggerate what happened. We shouldn't overreact. But what bothers me is that the same EFF stormed the gates of Gauteng Legislature. And there it wasn't just an incident, it was actually a storming. So the prior question for me is, what are the intentions of the EFF? Are they willing to play by the spirit of Parliament, or are they there to engage?
Could I ask you this? We don't have any of the political parties here. I mean, you're a retired MP, so let me put this to you. Wouldn't they say, if they were sitting here, so does the President require to play by the spirit of Parliament?
Of course.
And if he refuses to answer a question, what then?
I agree. But if he refuses to answer a question, you don't storm the gates.
Well, what do you do?
Well, you know, the legislation is clear. The Powers and Privileges Act is of 2004, talks about the contempt of Parliament. And a member is guilty of contempt if you fail or refuse to obey any rule or order by the Speaker.
All right.
So, you know, all members of Parliament are obliged in terms of the law, no matter how strongly you feel about things, to obey the rules.
All right, I'm going to press you on this later, but I want to ask, Professor Fikeni, what is your attitude? Was it a sad day for Parliament?
Well, I think the tragedy happened cumulatively some months and even a year before that day and some days after this incident. For this reason, the first one is that the issue of Nkandla ought to have been dealt with decisively long before it reaches that level of being exploited in Parliament. So that is what has been tragic, the slow response to it and the fact that it is still with us and may have a long shelf life like the arms deal. The sad one is also the fact that the ruling party seemed to react to an organized, attack or even anarchy in a knee-jerk fashion, such that they start looking bad because it doesn't look like they have well thought out responses, and at times they may overreact to a point where it makes the reaction or the action of the EFF look better than the response itself. So they should think carefully that the medicine prescribed is not worse than the sickness it seeks to secure. But the issue of respecting rules, I think, is key.
Well, can I ask you about that? I mean, Professor Turok here has raised the question of the EFF in the Gauteng legislature, and I think the point that he's making is, at some point you've got to say, well, hang on, there are ways of doing this, and this ain't one of them, and if you keep on kind of storming the gates of the legislature, you really undermine the democracy. So how does one then deal with that if you're the ruling party or any other party for that matter?
Well, I do think that you deal with it by dealing decisively with all the causal matters which can be exploited, where you deal with the issue of effectively responding to the Nkandla report and resolving the issues, or else you do have a situation where these may be exploited because Parliament itself might have been rendered ineffective if it has weak or slow response to these issues. But most important, though, is never to celebrate the fact that the storming of Parliament would lead to a response. Go back to the interviews of the EFF and utterances. They had said they would never respect unjust rules, even in Parliament. And therefore, they have a long program like the land, restitution. They do have the one on the minds. So we should not complain if we have accepted the reasoning which says the end justify the means, when they start doing exactly the same.
But aren't we then saying, well, if they come along and they say all of this, we just simply allow it? I mean, I think what Professor Turok is saying is that if you just ignore these rules and don't take a firm stance about it, the whole thing becomes chaotic. Everybody will just be shouting at each other.
Can I come in with a different point?
So, let him just finish and I'll come back to you. Yes, carry on.
Yes. I think it is very important to say that two things which are wrong should not be condoned under any circumstances. The one of storming Parliament, ignoring the rules in a lawmaking body, diminishing the image of that particular, institution is wrong. At the same time, the failure to deal decisively with issues like Nkandla is equally wrong. So we shouldn't, trying to resolve one, start saying the other one is better.
All right, thank you very much. I have to take a break, and then Professor Turok, I'll give you your chance, as I will Professor Callard.